The diplomatic tier of Concord Station shimmered like a glass cathedral suspended above a sea of drifting starlight, but Marcus Hale had never felt smaller within its vaulted corridors. His footsteps echoed against crystalline walls built to impress alien dignitaries, walls not meant for men like him. He had come armed with nothing more than a toolkit of precision shears and microsurgical combs, instruments that felt almost childish when compared to the political machines humming on every floor. Still, the summons was explicit. The Xyrillian envoy required his expertise immediately. He had only a vague description of the problem, but even that was enough to unsettle him. The envoy's daughter suffered unrelenting pain, and no physician or neural technician had uncovered the cause. A pair of towering guards met him at the entrance of the envoy's private wing. Their obsidian plating refracted light like polished stone, and their eyes, faceted like insect glass, studied him with profound skepticism. Marcus forced a polite smile, but neither guard reacted. Xyrillian security did not waste expressions on soft-boned species. "Human Marcus Hale," one finally said, its voice a melodic vibration rather than spoken sound. "The envoy awaits." The doors parted, revealing Envoy Drixtal himself, 8 feet of crystalline armor and sinew, half warrior and half aristocrat. His normally radiant plates were dimmed, a faint dullness spreading across his chest and throat. Marcus had researched enough Xyrillian behavior to recognize the meaning: emotional strain, unresolved fear. The envoy greeted him with a formal tilt of the head, and Marcus returned it as best he could, feeling awkward and fragile in comparison. "I thank you for arriving without delay," Drixtal said, the resonant timbre of his speech vibrating faintly through the floor. "Your reputation suggested you might succeed where our own healers have not." Marcus swallowed. "I'll do everything I can. But I should be honest, my work isn't magic. If the problem is neurological or genetic, It is neither," Drixtal interrupted. "We have tested every biological pathway. The source eludes us." Marcus nodded, relieved and uneasy at once. The Xyrillian's cranial filaments, fine sensory strands that sprouted from the upper skull like hair, were infamous for their complexity. They doubled as emotional receptors and environmental sensors, making even minor grooming a task requiring intense precision. He had trained for years to work with them, adjusting his techniques and building specialty tools. But this, whatever this was, had brought a diplomat of immense stature to desperation, and that fact whispered danger more loudly than any diagnosis. As Drixtal escorted him deeper into the chamber, Marcus listened carefully. He heard no crying, no distressed breathing, none of the noises he would expect from someone in agony. But the envoy had described the girl's suffering as daily and escalating. Either she slept, or she endured pain in stoic silence, as Xyrillian children were raised to do. That thought clenched Marcus's stomach. They passed through a narrow, dim hallway lined with translucent walls. Through them, Marcus glimpsed flickers of motion, security staff, aides, nervous attendants. The atmosphere radiated tension. Something was deeply wrong here, something more than medical failure. Drixtal paused before a final door. "Before you see her," he said, lowering his voice to a private register, "there is one truth you must accept. If this condition worsens, it threatens more than my family's honor. It threatens the stability of several negotiations critical to the Concord. My daughter is heir to a lineage steeped in political lineage and expectation. Weakness, in her case, is not merely personal." Marcus took a slow breath. "So, you're saying her pain is diplomatic?" The envoy's jaw tightened. "I am saying that for her suffering to persist without cause is intolerable." The door opened. Inside, the lights were softened to a pale lavender. The air carried the faint scent of cooling minerals. The girl sat in a reclining chair shaped to her exoskeletal frame, her posture unnervingly still. Her filaments hung behind her like a waterfall of delicate threads, each one shimmering with faint iridescence. Even from the threshold, Marcus could see tension winding through them, tiny spasms, subtle tremors, small but unmistakable. She was awake. Her crystalline eyes tracked him with quiet, guarded intelligence. Marcus approached slowly. "I'm Marcus," he said gently, even though he wasn't sure she understood human vocal tones. "I'm here to help if you'll let me." She didn't speak, but one of her filaments lifted, then settled again. Permission, or at least acknowledgement. Drixtal stood behind her, looming as though willing himself to stay calm. The envoy's presence carried immense gravity, but Marcus forced himself to focus entirely on the girl. He circled behind her and examined the base of her filaments, searching for any sign of infestation, infection, injury. He saw none. But something felt wrong, an odd resistance when he gently tested a strand, as though the filament was burdened by more than neural tension. He brought his tools closer and adjusted the microlight. The filaments reflected back a pattern he didn't expect. Some strands were subtly fused to others, not naturally, but as though adhered by pressure or heat. Strange. Unnatural. It wasn't enough to diagnose anything yet, but the sight sharpened his attention. He glanced at Drixtal. How long has she been like this? Since the beginning of the lunar cycle. The pain began subtly, an irritation, a stiffness. Then it worsened each day. And no physician noticed anything? Nothing conclusive. Marcus turned back to the girl, his mind racing. Whoever had worked on her, if anyone had, must have been extraordinarily covert. The filaments were too delicate for crude tampering. Even an accident would have left obvious residue. But what he observed bore none. As he shifted to inspect the right side, he noticed her shoulders tighten, barely, but perceptible. A flicker of pain. His chest tightened in response. "It's all right," he murmured, adjusting the angle. "I won't hurt you." With slow, deft movements, he lifted a cluster of filaments and traced their base downward, searching for the subtle abnormalities he suspected. There, almost invisible, a minuscule fragment of something wedged between two sensory strands. It was not organic, not debris. Something else entirely. A faint chill passed down his spine. Whatever this was, it was not a natural ailment. He lowered the strands with the same care he used to lift them, then drew a slow breath and stepped back. "You found something," Drixtal said quietly. Marcus nodded, his voice tightening. "I need more time to be certain, but I can tell you this much already." He looked from father to daughter, feeling the air shift as tension coiled around them. "This isn't a medical condition. Something has been done to her." Xyrillian arrived with the silent intensity of a drawn blade, stepping into the chamber before Marcus could resume his examination. His angular armor bristled with embedded sensors, and the deep-set glow of his faceted eyes suggested a man perpetually hunting for threats. As the envoy's security attaché, Xyrillian carried a reputation for unwavering vigilance, and that vigilance now fixed itself squarely on the lone human standing beside the diplomat's suffering daughter. "I was told technicians were forbidden from touching the air until my inspection was complete," Xyrillian said, his voice a low metallic vibration. Marcus didn't flinch. "Then someone forgot to tell the envoy." Drixtal stepped forward, his towering presence halting Xyrillian's advance. "I summoned him," the envoy said. "Your objections can wait." Xyrillian inclined his head, but the hostility in his gaze remained. Marcus ignored him and returned his attention to the fine filaments draped across the examination chair. The girl hadn't moved, though a faint shiver pulsed through the strands nearest her temples. Pain, suppressed by discipline. It tightened Marcus's chest again. No one her age should have to mask agony. He retrieved a micro-lens from his kit and slid it into place. The world narrowed to a close-up vista of shimmering sensors, each strand a living conduit of emotion and environmental input. As he parted them delicately, he caught the faintest glint of something wedged deeper between the fibers. He adjusted the magnification. There. A second fragment. This one was larger than the first, still microscopic, but unmistakably artificial. Perfectly geometric. Almost invisible without the right tools. Marcus eased it into view with a microcomb, careful to avoid tugging the sensory root. The girl winced faintly, a minuscule twitch that resonated through every filament. Xyrillian stepped closer, suspicion sharpening. "What are you doing to her?" Marcus didn't look up. finding the problem no one else found. You expect me to believe that device was already there? Marcus straightened just enough to meet the security officer's glare. If I had wanted to harm her, I wouldn't be using tools the size of needles. Drixtel silenced Krex with a single gesture. Let the human work. Marcus returned to the task, bracing the cluster of filaments with one steady hand while he extracted the fragment with the other. As the object detached, a subtle pulse ran through the filaments, like a fear response, but mechanical, not biological. Marcus froze, watching the strands quiver. The pulse faded, but its nature stuck in his mind like a warning. He held the removed piece under the lens. It reeked of precision engineering far beyond the typical grooming tech he used. Too sharp. Too deliberate. The edges bore microgrooves meant to latch into neural fibers. A weapon disguised as debris. He placed it on a sterile patch and leaned in again. If there were two, there could be more. Drixtel, Marcus said quietly, you need to know this isn't random. These weren't accidents. The envoy's posture stiffened. Explain. Marcus motioned him closer. These are implants, very small, very well hidden. They're binding the filaments together in ways they were never meant to be. Every movement she makes, every shift in her emotional state, these things amplify the stress. No wonder she's in pain. Krex scoffed. You speak as though you are certain. Marcus picked up the fragment and held it under the chamber's pale light. Because nothing natural forms like this. And nothing medical would be designed to stay invisible under standard scans. Drixtel's voice sharpened. Do you imply sabotage? I'm implying someone engineered this to go unnoticed unless the inspector had a trained eye and extreme magnification. So either someone inside your circle did this, Marcus said, carefully replacing the lens, or someone very determined managed to bypass your security. Krex's hand drifted toward the weapon plated to his thigh. You tread a dangerous line, human. Marcus didn't back down. If you think I put these there, then you've grossly overestimated my access and underestimated your own security breaches. Drixtel stepped between them. Enough. Continue the examination. Marcus nodded and leaned in again, feeling Krex's suspicion burning between his shoulder blades. He parted another cluster of filaments, following the unnatural rigidity until he found it, a third fragment, this one deeper, embedded like a parasite. He steadied his breath and began the delicate extraction, working faster now that he understood the pattern. Each device required a different angle, a different technique to detach without tearing the filaments. The process demanded absolute focus. The girl's fingers tightened around the armrest. She still didn't speak, but pain flickered across her crystalline irises. It's almost out, Marcus whispered, though he knew she might not understand the words. The sentiment mattered more than the language. As the third fragment broke free, a tremor rippled through the entire network of strands, far stronger than the earlier pulse. The chamber's air thickened, humming with subtle static. Marcus felt the change instantly. Drixtel's armor bristled. What was that? Marcus lowered the fragment onto the sterile patch. A reaction. These aren't just implants. They're connected to something. Maybe a signal. Maybe a network. Whatever they're linked to didn't like me removing that one. Krex folded his arms, jaw tight. You expect us to believe these devices are active? If they weren't before, Marcus said, they might be now. Before either alien could respond, the girl inhaled sharply, a sudden, trembling gasp that snapped all three men into motion. Her filaments stiffened, fanning out like the spines of a threatened creature. The static intensified, prickling over Marcus's skin. He stabilized her head gently. It's all right. I've got you. The tremor faded, slowly, reluctantly. Her breathing steadied. The filaments settled, though the rigidity remained. Marcus exhaled. She reacted to the extraction. That means whatever these things are, they're more than foreign objects. They're influencing her nervous system. And you can remove them all? Drixtel asked. Marcus hesitated. Not safely in one session. If they're interconnected, pulling one could activate the others. Krex's expression hardened. Then, what is your conclusion? Marcus wiped his tools, hands steady despite the tension wound tight in the room. He looked at the envoy first, then at the girl, then finally at Crex. "Someone did this intentionally," he said, voice low but firm. "And we're only just beginning to understand what they were trying to make her do." Marcus worked in silence for several minutes, using the careful rhythm that had guided him through hundreds of delicate procedures. But this time, every motion felt heavier, every breath more strained. The girl's filaments trembled with a thin vibration that wasn't quite pain and wasn't quite fear. Something in between, something unnatural. Each quiver reminded Marcus that the devices embedded within her were not passive objects. They were a system, a lattice, perhaps even a trap. Drixtal stood close, his crystalline armor dimming with each passing moment. "You said removing them all at once is dangerous," he rumbled. "Explain why." Marcus didn't look up. He was isolating another fragment, coaxing it free with slow, practiced motions. Think of her filaments like a musical instrument. Someone's tied a series of strings together so tight they're strangling each other. But more than that, each knot is wired. If you pull the wrong one too fast, the whole system reacts. "So we proceed carefully," Drixtal said. Marcus nodded, carefully and methodically. Crex paced behind them like a predator denied its instinct. His footsteps barely sounded, but Marcus felt the agitation radiating off him. "Why would anyone target a child?" he muttered. "What strategic value could she possibly hold?" Marcus removed the fourth fragment and set it aside. "She's not just a child," he said quietly. "She's the heir of a diplomatic house. Whoever did this didn't want to kill her. They wanted control." Drixtal's armor flared with a shimmering pulse, the Xyrillian equivalent of barely restrained fury. "Name the perpetrators, human if you dare." Marcus shook his head. "I don't have names. Not yet." He leaned in again. "But I'm starting to understand their intent." He probed deeper into the filament cluster. The resistance increased. Something was fighting him, not physically, but through an unseen mechanism that made the strands tighten against his tools. The girl stiffened, a soft tremor shuddering through her frame. Marcus whispered to her, "Stay with me. Just a little more." Her breathing steadied. The filaments relaxed just enough for him to continue. Crex stepped closer, watching with an intensity that bordered on distrust. "You're handling her as though she is fragile." Marcus didn't break focus. "Because she is." Every filament is tied directly to her sensory cortex. A human hair can be pulled with no pain. But one wrong motion here, and I could cause days of suffering. Crex fell silent, chastened. Marcus paused as he found something new. Not another fragment, something worse. "Drixtal," he said, voice barely above a breath. "You need to see this." The envoy moved to Marcus's side, lowering his massive frame to observe. Under the microlight, a faint metallic glimmer pulsed between 6 filaments. It was larger than the previous devices, its surface etched with geometric lines arranged in deliberate patterns. "A central node," Marcus said. "The others must be feeding into this." Drixtal's eyes hardened. "Remove it." "I will," Marcus said. "But this one's different. Removing it may trigger a cascade." Before Drixtal could answer, a new voice filled the chamber. "I would advise great caution." All three turned as Ambassador Thale Varos entered the room, his diplomatic robes trailing in the lavender light. His presence shifted the atmosphere immediately, calm yet commanding, with the subtle pressure of a man accustomed to difficult negotiations. He offered a steady, assessing look at the equipment and the fragments laid out. "Thale," Marcus said, straightening. "You weren't supposed to be here until—" "I was notified of irregular neural activity in the envoy's quarters," the ambassador said. "Security protocols demanded my presence." Crex bristled. "Human or not, your arrival was not requested. Nor was yours when you first began following the envoy's daughter 2 months ago," Thale replied evenly. Marcus blinked. "Following her?" Crex stiffened, armor plates locking. "Monitoring her routines. As ordered." "By whom?" Thale asked. Crex didn't answer. Marcus turned back to the central node, his mind racing. If someone had manipulated security access, or routed commands through the implant network using official channels. The implications chilled him. "We can argue later," Marcus said. "Right now, this thing needs to come out." He steadied his hands and maneuvered the micro-heat wand into position. The central node pulsed again, as though sensing the threat. The filaments around it tensed. Marcus whispered to the girl, "It's all right. Let it loosen." Just like before. Slowly, agonizingly, the filaments relaxed. The node's hold weakened. Marcus engaged the wand. A soft hum filled the chamber. Then the node surged. A shock wave of static rippled outward, slamming through the filaments, up Marcus's arms, and across the room. The girl cried out, the first sound she had made since he arrived. Drixtal moved instantly, steadying her shoulders. Krex reached for his weapon. Thales stepped forward with unexpected speed. Marcus held on. The shock lashed through him again, brighter, sharper, enough to numb one hand. He gritted his teeth and lowered his grip, using his forearm to shield the girl's skull. The filaments flared with electric light, each strand glowing in a cascade of color. The node cracked. A second shockwave hit, violent, disorienting. The floor trembled. Lights flickered. The chamber's shielding activated with a low bass hum, responding to the surge of foreign energy. Marcus pushed through the pain, fingers locking around the tiny device. "Almost," he muttered, barely aware he'd spoken. "Almost." The node snapped free. The filament network collapsed, the static dissipating in a single soft sigh, as if the entire system exhaled. The girl slumped into her father's arms, still breathing, still conscious, but free. Marcus collapsed to one knee, the charred node resting in his palm. Pain throbbed along his arms, but relief hit him first. He had done it. Drixtal lowered his daughter gently and looked at Marcus with something deeper than gratitude, almost reverence. Ambassador Thale leaned in, eyes narrowing as he examined the fractured device. "This contains a command lattice," he said slowly, "encoded with diplomatic signatures." Krex's breath hitched. "How is that possible?" Marcus closed his hand around the device, forcing himself upright. "Because whoever did this wasn't trying to harm her," he said. "They were trying to control her." The room fell silent. Then Marcus added, voice edged with quiet certainty. "And this," he held up the cracked node, "is only the first piece of proof." Marcus regained consciousness slowly, as though rising through thick water. The lights above him were soft and diffuse, and the quiet hum of medical machinery echoed faintly against his skull. His arms throbbed with a deep, electrical ache, as if the shockwaves still lived beneath his skin. When he tried to sit up, a gentle but firm crystalline hand pressed him back. "You are not yet recovered," Drixtal said. Even whispered, the envoy's voice resonated through the room. Marcus blinked, focusing on the towering silhouette beside the bed. How long was I out?" 3 hours, Drixtal replied. "Long enough for the physicians to confirm what your actions accomplish." Marcus's heartbeat quickened. "Your daughter?" "Stable," the envoy said, and for the first time since Marcus had met him, the dullness had left Drixtal's armor. Faint radiance pulsed across his plates, a signal of profound relief. "The pain has ceased entirely." Marcus let out a long breath and sank back into the bed. "Good," he murmured. "That's good." A second figure approached, Ambassador Thale Varos, hands clasped behind his back. His expression was one of calm contemplation layered over something more troubled. "You did more than stop her pain," Thale said. "The central node you removed contained command sequences encrypted with high-level diplomatic access. Someone embedded those codes intentionally, likely years ago, anticipating future political leverage." Marcus grimaced. "So it was espionage, or blackmail, or both." "More than that," Thale continued. "The pattern suggests an attempt to manipulate the envoy through his heir. Indirect influence. A method of coercion nearly impossible to detect." Drixtal lowered his head. "The betrayal strikes close. One of our own factions sought to use her as a vessel for their schemes." Marcus frowned, turning the information over slowly. "Why not just threaten you directly?" "Because," Thale answered, The Xyrillian view threats to offspring as the gravest dishonor. A show of vulnerability. A weakness that would fracture diplomatic alliances instantly. Whoever orchestrated this knew they could drive Drixtal into isolation or compliance without ever speaking a word. Crex Varen entered then, his posture subdued. The sharp vigilance he'd worn earlier had softened into something almost respectful. He stood at the foot of the bed, hands behind his back, chin lowered. "I misjudged you," he said to Marcus. "Your actions preserved the envoy's legacy and exposed a threat I failed to detect." Marcus gave a tired smile. "It's fine. You were protecting her. Can't blame you for doing your job." Crex inclined his head, the gesture stiff but sincere. Drixtal moved closer, lowering himself to sit beside the bed. The crystalline creak of his armor was strangely comforting. "There is more," he said. "My daughter, she asked for you." Marcus blinked. "She talked." "No," Drixtal corrected gently. "But she signed her name in our pattern light language. Her gratitude is profound." Emotion tightened Marcus's throat unexpectedly. He'd only known the girl for hours, yet the idea that she felt safe with him struck deeply. Thales stepped forward again. "There is a final matter. The diplomatic court met while you rested. They reviewed the implants, the command recordings, and Crex's surveillance logs. The evidence provided by your extraction led to the arrest of the faction responsible." Marcus frowned. "You moved fast." "We had to," Thales said. "The Concord Summit begins in 2 days. A scandal of this scale, left unresolved, would shatter the negotiations. Humanity's standing would have been collateral damage." "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. Drixtal placed a crystalline hand against his chest, a gesture that carried ceremonial significance. "Now," he said, "I honor you." Marcus shifted, uneasy. "Honor me how?" "By offering you a role within the Concord," the envoy said. "You have demonstrated an understanding of sensory structures no physician has matched. Your steadiness preserved my daughter's life and exposed treachery festering within our walls. We ask that you serve as an advisor, a guardian of sensory health for all species allied here." Marcus stared at him. "You want to hire me?" "A position of great esteem," Thales said. "And influence." Marcus let the offer settle. It was tempting, galaxies beyond anything he'd imagined when he opened his little salon on Earth. But he shook his head slowly. "I'm just a hairdresser," he said. "A good one, but I'm not a diplomat or a scientist or a guardian of anything." Crex stepped forward. "You are a man who protects the vulnerable. That is enough." Marcus looked down at his hands, still trembling slightly from the residual shock. "I'll help when I'm needed," he said. "But I'm not leaving my life behind." Drixtal considered this, then bowed his head in acceptance. "Then so be it. We will not force you. But know this, Marcus Hale. You have earned a place among us whenever you choose." The door slid open softly, and the girl entered. Supported by an attendant, she moved with careful steps, her filaments free from their previous tension. They flowed behind her like a quiet, luminous waterfall. She approached Marcus, stopping at his bedside. Her hands glowed faintly as she traced a pattern in the air, an elegant ripple of light. Marcus didn't understand its exact meaning, but the sentiment was unmistakable. Gratitude. Trust. Safety. He smiled at her. "You're welcome," he said softly. "I'm glad you're feeling better." Drixtal watched the exchange in silence before speaking once more. "Sometimes, human," he murmured, "the greatest victories are won not with weapons or strategy, but with hands steady enough to heal what others cannot." Marcus let out a breath, tired but content. "Just doing my job," he said. And for the first time since the ordeal began, the entire room, envoy, guard, ambassador, and heir, seemed to breathe with him.